Thanks for joining us in the Florida Today newsroom, where I just interviewed one of Brevard's most impactful state politicians and one of the most fun. Representative Rich Workman of Melbourne has become an achiever in Tallahassee. In recent sessions, he authored and passed big, controversial bills overhauling public pensions and Florida's entire system for managing growth and development. This year, the legislature passed signature bills by Workman to regulate the use of drone aircraft and to modernize divorce and alimony laws. If that weren't enough, Workman also made the first significant move by a Republican to collect an internet sales tax, but in a way that would make sense to conservatives in business and maybe liberals too. I asked Workman what's next for that. I also asked him what's next for the divorce and alimony reform after Governor Rick Scott vetoed his bill over some specific concerns. Take a look. Let's talk about drones, because you passed a bill this year that deals with what can they do in Florida, what can they not do? Explain.
Sure. Thanks, Matt, for bringing that up. Very proud of this bill. The governor signed it into law. Florida becomes the first state to regulate drone use. It doesn't make us an anti-drone state, but what it does do is it does the same thing that happened, and I'm sure this paper probably covered it in great detail 30 years ago when the nation implemented phone tapping laws. You know, when we were first able to phone tap, it was done willy-nilly, to use a legal phrase, willy-nilly. And then somebody said, whoa, the Supreme Court said you can't do that. It's an invasion of privacy. You need a warrant to phone tap. Well, drones are becoming much more inexpensive now, and 2 police agencies in Florida own some drones. More want to own drones. And what I wanted to prevent was a nanny state where drones are sent up over a neighborhood that the sheriff or the police chief wants to keep an eye on and just circles over your house until looking for crime.
Right.
That's windows, that's backyard pools. That is not a country that I want to live in. So we didn't ban them. We simply said, get a warrant. If you need them, get a warrant. Now, we made some exceptions: kidnappings, immediate danger, forest fires, traffic. These kind of things we're fine with. I'm not fine with them being used to surveil the public, and without a warrant, our police forces in Florida won't be able to.
I would have thought maybe that was a little bit over-concerned a year or two ago, but now that journalists are being spied on by the administration, I could just easily foresee somebody putting up a drone to see where a reporter might go to meet with the source someplace.
Well, and a year ago, even a year ago, drones were much more expensive. But it takes thousands of dollars an hour to fly a helicopter with 2 deputies in it.
Right.
It's 70 cents an hour once you get a drone up. So the difference is remarkable, and they're going to become much more used. The FAA is even changing the law on how they can fly them. I don't want to be a state where we use them to surveil without a warrant.
How do you square your bill with what Space Florida is doing right now and trying to win some kind of status as a drone testing and development site? Do they work together? Do they work at cross purposes? What do you think?
Matt Reed, I try to say things exactly the way they are. And Space Florida met with me when I first ran this bill, and it was being tagged as the anti-drone bill. And I said it's not an anti-drone bill, it's an anti-illegal surveillance bill. It's a pro Fourth Amendment bill. It's a pro citizens' rights bill. If the model of the companies that you want to bring here to build their drones, if their business model says we're going to sell these to a whole bunch of police forces so they can spy on the people, then we don't want them. But if their model is to build good drones and used in search and rescue and used in warranted surveillance, then bring them on. So it doesn't make us an anti-drone state. It simply makes us a state that has correctly regulated drones. And I hope that they will still be able to attract these drone companies to come here and test. But if they're, like I said, if their business model is to spy on the citizens, then we're not the state for them.
You know what I could see a drone being used for? Instead of the traffic copter for news stations. Yeah. In fact, I want a drone. I think my boss wants a drone. We want to get up there and get some aerial photos of things like the lagoon without having to pay a helicopter operator to do that. Can we do that?
You can do that.
Okay.
But if you use that to spy on me, I will put you in jail.
Good to know, Rich. We'll make sure that, okay, don't go near that guy's house. Watch out for the Winnebago up in,
right. The
in
1983
Tallahassee.
Winnebago, that's
there
right.
you go. Let's talk about health care reform, Medicaid. That was a big issue with the legislature this year. Governor Scott said he wanted Florida to embrace this federal money to expand Medicaid coverage to 1 million+ people in Florida who didn't have coverage. The House specifically, or more so than the Senate, it sounded like, was really against that and had other ideas. What was your take?
Well, the Speaker of the House said very clearly that we're not buying what the federal government's selling. we're not going to take that $3 billion at the expense of taxpayers. And I want to use your show as an opportunity to explain what that Medicaid expansion in Florida looks like. That 1.1 million people that we talk about expanding Medicaid to, let me tell you who they are. Florida covers up to 138% of the poverty level, every single child in the state of Florida, every single pregnant woman in the state of Florida, every single disabled, mentally or physically person in the state of Florida, up to 115% of the poverty level. What we don't cover is able-bodied men and women that simply make a little bit less money. We don't cover able-bodied folks. We cover 0 of them. 900,000 of the 1.1 million would have been able-bodied men or women without children. We said, we're not expanding to that. We're not going that route in Florida. No, thank you, President Obama. We're not going to expand to them. We do, however, want to cover the safety net. We want to cover our kids. We want to cover our disabled. We want to cover our seniors. I left them out. I'm sorry. We cover 100% of our seniors, up to 115%. The other 200,000 would take us from the 115 to the 138 level on a couple of those categories. The House passed a bill to do just that. So we did try to expand it on the safety net because the poverty level hasn't really gone up, and so we would have expanded to one.
You got to be really poor to qualify for Medicaid at this point, right? I mean,
it depends on how many kids you've got.
Okay.
Remember, I mean, if you're just a single person, then no, really, you don't have to be really, really poor. But if you have, but the more kids you have, your income can go up, but it's much more expensive to have all those kids. So the answer is we wanted a safety net. We agreed that maybe we should expand to those 200,000 folks that are that have kids or that are disabled. But the 900,000 that Mr. Obama wants us to expand to, we stood strong, and I agree with that position. And so nothing got done because we couldn't agree between the House and the Senate. And I'm better with nothing being done than expanding to 900,000 able-bodied men or women that have no children.
So I think a key distinction here, it sounds like, is safety net versus universal coverage.
You got it. Very well put. Thank you for clarifying.
The one thing that seems to fall in the middle, though, and I've heard other publications bring this issue up, is what about all these service sector and tourism sector people in Florida who they are working, but they don't really have any hope of having health insurance because either their employers don't typically provide that in that sector very much, but also it's very expensive. Is there some middle ground that Florida could get in on in helping those people get coverage so that they're not going to emergency rooms and we're not having to pay hospitals out of taxpayer dollars to cover them?
Matt Reed, I'm going to say no. It's not like we have a mystery number. I've told you there's 900,000 men and women that do not have children, that are not covered by Medicaid, that fall in the income categories that would qualify them for Medicaid if we would expand it to 138% of the poverty level. And I don't think that's a safety net. I think that there's a lifestyle choice there that perhaps those folks could find ways to get emergency coverage. It's not that expensive, Matt Reed, to get just the catastrophic coverage we're talking about. It doesn't mean they'll have the checkups and they won't have if they have the flu to go down to the local clinic. But I am all for the safety net. I am not for universal coverage. And I think that we can make household decisions that could cover them versus the government covering them.
Okay. Let's talk about alimony reform, because that was a signature bill for you this year. It passed the legislature, but then was vetoed. What would this bill have done?
Alimony reform, let's be clear, alimony has not been overhauled in about 50 years. So our laws still basically assume that the man has the education, the man works, the woman stays home with the kids and has no education. That's the laws prevail. 90% of payers in this state are men. Those facts are drastically changing. Very few households are set that way. Women are graduating college more than men. The executives in companies are more and more women. The average income of women have raised dramatically, even with children. But the laws haven't changed. So it remains 90% of payers are men. And so what I look to do is remove permanent alimony. I don't think that a 9-year marriage should result in permanent alimony. I recategorized what a short-term and medium-term and long-term marriage was. So 11 years or shorter is a short-term. There's a presumption against alimony in those short-term marriages. From 11 to 20, there's no presumption towards alimony at all. But I did add above 20, a 20-year marriage plus, there's a presumption towards alimony. I did away with the cohabitation rules that said if you cohabitate you don't get your alimony. Cohabitation is hard to prove. I changed that to a supportive relationship. So if I'm trying to take the gamesmanship out of it. The one thing that we have in a post-marriage society is that unless alimony ends, unless it fixes the problem, allows the spouse to move into the workplace, that lifetime dependency creates a very hard place to raise kids. If you talk to your friends that are divorced and they hate each other, ask how much money they pay between each other. And you'll find that typically money is the root of that evil. When you have to cut a check to your ex-husband every month for alimony, not child support, but alimony, that creates a whole lot of angst between the two of them. Tiffany and I, my ex-wife, we're good friends. We split custody. We have no alimony. She had to cut me a check for $400 for some tax bill, and she goes, "Oh, thank God I don't pay you alimony. I couldn't do this again." And we laughed about it. But it really made me realize money is why these families don't heal. And so what I've done is I created durational, transitional, and I'll come back to it, but alimony types that remove long-term, remove permanent alimony.
But it's the judge's job, it would be the judge's job to determine whether it's short-term, long-term, the different terms or different classifications of people in the...
And it sets guidelines that the judge can override with just preponderance of the evidence, with a written statement. So it says that typically alimony should not exceed half the time of the marriage. So a 10-year marriage, 5 years of alimony is set as typical. But there's so many circumstances. Alimony is not child support. Child support is very black and white in this state, and it's done very well. Here's what you make, here's what you owe. Alimony doesn't work that way. The needs are too different. So the judge can easily say, all right, look, the marriage was 15 years. She stayed home the entire 15 years. She had a law degree, but she stopped 15 years ago. She's not even a member of the bar. We need to get her back to the member of the bar. So we're going to give her 3 years of transitional alimony, and then we're going to give her another 4 years after that to get back on her feet, plus durational to take her up for the 7.5 years. So you can stack them. This wasn't an anti-alimony bill. It was simply a refurbishing of the bill, of the way we do it, trying to do away with the long-term dependency on the ex and create a system that gets you back on your feet quicker financially and gets you back. Silly things that existed in the law are fixed. For example, and I'll be brief, the law used to presume that the person that received alimony would retain the same lifestyle he or she had during the marriage. That's what the law says right now. Well, that's ridiculous. That's like splitting the baby, right?
Right.
If you take a $100,000 income and you split it in the middle, you both don't have a $100,000 income, but the law says that the receiver of alimony has the right to the same standard of living they had.
That's difficult.
It's difficult. So my bill just simply said they have the right that both parties will receive a lesser standard of living by default, and that the receiver has the right to receive the needs and necessities of life as set forth at the time of the separation. That's much different than the standard of living.
It sounds like a modernization.
It really was.
Okay, so Governor Scott vetoes it. What's the explanation he gives, and did he give you any feedback on like what could you do to the law next year or the bill next year?
That's a trick question because
to get it over the hump with him.
When governors veto something, they send out a veto letter, and his veto letter said because the bill was retroactive for some people, he vetoed it based on the fact that it had retroactivity, and he didn't want it to go back and change existing marital settlement agreements. Now, the bill always had that. I met with the governor 3 times. He never mentioned that was a problem. And I actually condensed the number of people that could go back. Just short-term marriages that resulted in long-term alimony. I said, you know what, let's have a judge take a second look at that. Everyone else that wanted to modify based on the new law would have to pierce the law the same as you pierce a prenup.
I see. Very
high standard. You've got to prove duress, overreach. I mean, a lot of things that are very hard standards. That's what he vetoed it on according to the letter. So I removed that, attached it to another family law bill that was in the books, and he made it very clear to veto it again. So I don't know what the governor wants. He's invited me to come meet with him, and I will. The problem, Matt Reed, is that I will not pass a bill just to pass a bill. I've reformed pension. I've reformed growth management. I thought I would have reformed alimony. But I won't just pass a bill to say I finally got something done with alimony. So if it's not a reform bill, he can do it himself. I won't help him. I'll wait him out and I'll pass a real reform. I believe the system is broken, Mr. Reed, and it needs to be fixed. It doesn't need any more Band-Aids. D.C. does a whole lot of Band-Aids. I want reform in Florida.
Okay. You had another bill that passed a committee. I was really interested in this one because it's been a subject of some contention both at the federal level and the state level, and that was to classify internet sales the same as mail order sales and to apply a sales tax. Why did you do that? It seems like that's, some people say that's a tax increase. What do you say?
Well, it's called the e-fairness bill, and I've always thought that I would oppose any kind of taxation on the internet. But the reality is more and more people are shopping day to day on the internet. And the law is clear that if you buy goods on the internet, you as a consumer must pay the tax directly to the Florida Department of Revenue. This bill really decriminalizes you, Matt, and the guy behind the camera, and you at home. It decriminalizes you. Because if you buy something on the internet from Amazon.com
okay.
and you don't pay the sales tax, you are breaking the law by not paying the sales tax, remitting it to the DOR.
I did not know that.
We collect about $9 million a year from honest citizens that buy on the internet and pay their tax. It's a fact. The Florida law requires you to pay it, but you're not. And the cost to the state to try to go and find your receipts and find how much you didn't pay it on would overwhelm the number that we would get from it. But it is the law that you must pay tax on what you buy on the internet. It is also a law you must pay tax when you buy retail. The difference is we have a deal with retail. They collect it for us.
Right.
They collect it for you, quite honestly. We don't have that deal with the internet because they hide behind the interstate commerce law. They don't have a footprint in Florida, so they don't collect the tax for us. It gives them an advantage over our retail stores. What my bill did, because I don't want to raise taxes, nor do I want to raise revenue for the state, my bill was a direct set-off. It said, okay, look, let's make these internet retailers collect and remit on our behalf, just like Kmart and Walmart
right.
does. Let's make Amazon do the same thing online that Walmart does at its stores. The offset, though, is that for every dollar raised in revenue in internet taxation, Florida would have a tax holiday to directly offset it. So if we raised $500 million on the internet, we would have a $500 million retail holiday. So right now we have a 3-day that's worth about $36 million. So you can imagine maybe a 2-month no sales tax in the whole state to offset whatever we raise on the internet. And the bill went on to say that if at any point it hits $1 billion in revenue on the internet, we would deduct 0.25% off the state sales tax permanently. So we're current 6%, we would drop it to 5.75 once we hit $1 billion. It takes about $1 billion for 0.25%.
So what you're saying is there already is an internet sales tax. We just don't collect it. And if
we collect it, you just don't pay it.
Okay, we don't have a good way to.
We are waiting to
the state doesn't have a good way to collect it, and many people who buy, not me, of course. Anybody who buys online is not paying it. But if it was uniform and it was fairly collected and paid, you'd be able to lower the actual rate across the board.
Exactly. By making sure that all sales transactions in the state are taxed equally, you would be able to reduce our 6% sales tax down exponentially. So, because the internet used to be 1% of the retail sales, now it's somewhere around 20%.
Right.
As that number increases, that means your 6% sales tax that you pay for everything else has to go up eventually. As more people move here, the state will need the revenue. At some point, it's going to have to go up because it's the shrinking pool. As internet increases, retail sales decrease, you're asking retail buyers to pay for those that don't collect on the internet. And that's just patently unfair. So it's not a tax increase because my bill was very clear. Dollar for dollar raise in the internet must be offset by a reduction in the state sales tax, period. And it was also, in order to change it in the future, you'd have to pass a bill. So it continued indefinitely until the state legislature decided to undo it, which is a very difficult thing to do.
You just said something that I don't think I've ever thought about it that way before, which is it's not that having the tax on retail is unfair to those retailers. It's that the people who are paying the tax at the local level at a brick and mortar store are paying more than they probably need to if the tax was modernized and you were able to collect on those online sales.
Right.
Did I phrase that right?
You did, but my conservative friends will tell you, I can't believe Workman's talking about tax the internet. What they need to hear is that my bill was a net zero increase in revenue to the state. See, other states have used internet sales collection as an increase in their revenue. But Florida is not going to do that. Florida, my bill, and what I think would have passed if the governor hadn't decided he didn't like it, said we are not collecting $1 of revenue. We will offset it dollar for dollar with a reduction in the state sales tax. That's a big deal. I'm meeting with Grover Norquist in a couple weeks. He is very interested in the way I set that bill up because he doesn't mind taxing internet as long as not one penny sneaks into the politicians' pockets. So he wants to see how I lock down future legislatures, how I set it up so that next year, maybe it's tax neutral this year or revenue neutral this year, but next year we get secret money to the Treasury. That's what my friends, my conservative friends, are worried about. Is that if you do it, Rich, it's just more money in politicians' pockets to spend on, parks and whatever else you like, Matt. And that's the fact is my bill absolutely made that impossible. Every dollar that came in reduced the amount of taxes you pay retail.
I like schools and libraries.
Okay, well,
I confess.
Schools are great.
Okay.
And libraries are great funded locally.
Let's talk about space. I know that Space Caucus has been a big issue for you in the past.
It is the final frontier.
How'd things go this year in terms of space from your perspective?
Very, very fantastic, to use bad grammar. We're blessed to have Steve Crisafulli, the next speaker. Obviously, he represents the area that has the spaceport in it. Space Florida did wonderfully. We have a lot of and I don't know the dollar amounts at this point. I didn't bring those notes, but a lot of incentives set aside strictly for aerospace businesses to attract them to the Space Coast and to Florida, because it's whatever benefits Florida.
Right. What do you see as some of the biggest issues that are cooking right now that the space can be there to help with? Shiloh, for example, that property up there with private space is a big one. I know that is in flux. Obviously, the Space Florida is doing its drone thing. What's the next frontier, so to speak? Well,
I'll tell you though, what I've been concentrating on is trying to get Elon Musk to stop. He really doesn't want to be NASA-like, so he doesn't want to. But he's looking more NASA-like. He's it's headquartered in California. He tests in Texas and in Arizona, and he launches from here. Now he's got another launch somewhere else. I'm trying to get Elon to understand: bring your facility to one of the greatest, lowest tax states in the union. I think we're ranked number 3 for business. That may go up now that we did that manufacturer's tax credit this year, where manufacturers don't pay tax on new equipment. That brings in new jobs. We've got to get him to stop looking like NASA. He's not acting like NASA. He's building rockets on the cheap that are fantastic, but he's looking like it because of his spread outness. I want him to bring it all, consolidate to Florida, and I've been making a real strong push for that. That's huge. We need to, we don't know where NASA's going, but we know where Elon Musk is going.
You are known for introducing a repealer bill or two every year.
I try. It's getting harder and harder.
What happened this year?
Well, I filed a repealer for motorcycle handlebar height. I just think it's ridiculous that we get down to that nitty-gritty. No one in the Senate was interested in partaking in it.
I think the rules now say that you cannot have handlebars where your grip is higher than your shoulder level.
Right, but we know they exist.
Is that important?
No, it's not important. But let's just be clear that we always want to mention that because of me, you're a bit more free. You can ride your bike without both hands on the handlebar. You can coast down a hill without engaging your brake or the clutch. You can have a beer bottle collection in your home without committing a felony. So we have got...
Thank you, Rich.
You're welcome. I will tell you that adultery is still a second-degree misdemeanor in this state. So it would be punishable by 60 days in jail and a $500 fine if you're caught cheating on your spouse. It is also against the law, second-degree misdemeanor, to cohabitate with the opposite sex. It is legal to cohabitate with the same sex.
It is?
Yeah, see, a lot of people get upset because we're very, people see us as a little homophobic about the abortion rights and, the adoption rights, and gay marriage. But cohabitation among the same sex is legal in the state. It's cohabitation among opposite sex that is illegal in this state.
Wow.
And I think it's ridiculous. I don't bring up that issue because of the gay side of the issue. I bring up that issue because I think it's ridiculous that this state still holds a second-degree misdemeanor for adultery and cohabitation. When I ran those bills a few years ago, University of South Florida called me and said, "Is it really illegal?" I said, "Yes, it is." And they stopped construction on a co-gender dorm.
But didn't you just say a few minutes ago that you can get alimony from a long-term cohabitation kind of relationship?
You cannot.
You cannot?
No. We don't have a... we
don't have a common law marriage situation
We're
here in
not
Florida?
a common law life, no. But no, you can't. And you legally can't cohabitate. Yet, in alimony law, if you do cohabitate, it's means to remove your alimony. Well, the law says if you're cohabitating. Doesn't that mean if you're breaking the law? because it's just dumb. It's just dumb that we have those laws. I'm not supporting adultery or cohabitation. I'm engaged, but I'm not cohabitating. I'm just saying it shouldn't be up to the state to tell me if that is good or not.
Speaking of being engaged, you got engaged.
I did.
In a fairly interesting manner. What happened? Tell us the story.
Well, it wasn't my fault. It's simply introducing my family members and my girlfriend at my committee of Finance and Tax Committee, and John Tabaya said that he over the microphone said if I didn't ask her to marry me, he would. So I had a vote. I asked all those in favor of me proposing to Terry Ann Ellerton, say aye, and it was unanimous. So I jumped over the rostrum and almost ate it, by the way, and I happened to have the ring in my pocket, so obviously it wasn't set up. And
that was convenient.
It was convenient, and there in front of our kids, she said yes. And Terry's a speech pathologist and works with handicapped kids and has softened my heart, and I love her very much. I'm very excited about it.
On the side, you do stuff, something called Workmen's Warriors.
Workman Warriors.
What is that?
It's a 5K race through Wickham Park, only off-road, no roads at all through the woods and the trails in the back of Wickham Park. And it raises money for the Sentinels of Freedom, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to severely wounded veterans, and Horseplay Brevard, which is a therapeutic horseback nonprofit. Getting bigger every year. Would love your participation, Matt Reed. Come on out. It's August the 4th this year. You can learn more at workmanwarriors.com. The reason it's August 4th is August 1st is notoriously the hottest day of the year, so I try to get as close to that day as possible. It's an Army theme.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Get you a camouflage T-shirt, get you some water, you'll be all right. 7:30 in the morning, August the 4th.
All right. What's next for you? Are you any leadership positions in the House coming up, or?
Well, Finance and Tax is a leadership committee. I'm hoping to continue to rise in statute, especially with Steve moving into the Speaker Designate, or as Speaker Designate moving into the Speaker's position. So I will tell you that you get a whole lot more done the longer you're up there. So I'm excited to continue, and I'm really, really thankful that Steve became our next Speaker. I'm thankful that because he's going to do a great job.
Rich Workman, thank you for fighting the rain. Come and talk with us today.
You got it, brother. Bye-bye.
Well, that's our program. Remember to comment on anything you saw here or have read in Florida Today. Send an email of 200 words or less to letters@floridatoday.com. We'll see you right here next Wednesday on WBCC and FloridaToday.com.